Plus, the mainstream media were comparing its coverage of the Tea Party protests to its treatment of the immigration law protests in Arizona. One is called ugly, violent, and racist. The other, quote, mostly peaceful. Try to guess which is which.
Stop what you're doing!
Well, new questions today about the mainstream media and its coverage of two very different protests. Screen left, protests erupting in Arizona over the new immigration law. Screen right, last month's Tea Party protest in Washington, ahead of the big health care reform vote. Notice any difference? In Arizona, protesters are hurling bottles at police. Several protesters were arrested. In Washington, there were accusations of nasty comments outside the Capitol, but not a single arrest. And yet, to hear some of the mainstream media report it, the Arizona scene was, quote, mostly peaceful, while D.C. was considered, quote, very ugly. Two of our favorite radio guys are here to debate it. Mark Levine is host of Inside Scoop, and Mike Gallagher is a radio talk show host and Fox News contributor. All right, gentlemen, so this is how they tee it up. These, you know, Mike, these folks protesting the Tea Party, well, they're racists, according to some of the mainstream media, and yet the folks protesting the illegal immigration law, well, they're mostly peaceful.
Megan, the double standard on this one really reaches comical proportions. Today on my radio show, I played a 15-second clip from a respected journalist named Mike Von Frem from ABC News. And in his report, he was covering the Phoenix riots, right? He's saying, oh, we got riot police out here. There are rocks being thrown. Now the protests are mostly peaceful. I mean, he literally said the protests are mostly peaceful in the body of reporting on rocks being thrown, riot police being brought in, and yet this nonsensical, mythical act of spitting or racial epithets at the Tea Party protests, that's reported breathlessly by the mainstream media folks like Mike Von Frem. It's absolutely laughable. It's comical to see the way the media has this agenda, and the agenda is the pro-illegal immigration protesters, they're good. Us Tea Partiers, they're bad, and they're sticking to that narrative, and they don't care what the facts say.
Mark, in fairness to Mike's position, can you imagine if the tape we are watching now was Tea Partiers doing this? Can you imagine what the mainstream media coverage would have been like?
Well, we've seen what happened. Both protests were mostly peaceful. Both had some wackos doing some things. And what happens? Fox News is the pot calling the kettle black. Look at those photos you're showing. If you show the immigration protesters, the camera angle's all jaunty, it's shaking, it's up and down, it looks really raucous. And then you show the Tea Party people, and it's very calm. No, the Tea Party, you can do the same thing. You can jump the camera around. You can show where people are spitting on John Lewis, a civil rights hero who is called the N-word.
Just to be clear, is it Fox News who made somebody throw a bottle at the head of that mustache police officer? I mean,
I assume it's not Fox News who caused people to shout the N-word and the F-word at members of Congress at the Tea Parties. The point is, both protests are mostly peaceful, and both of them have wackos. And what the media does, if they want to focus on the peaceful, they do. If they want to focus on the wackos, they do. They're all guilty of it, including Fox.
Let me ask you a question, Mark. First of all, your preposterous allegation that the Fox News cameraman is jiggling the camera to make it look bad. Yeah, that's the latest round of a wave of wacko conspiracy
theories. It's not our cameraman, by the way. Just for
what
it's worth.
Tell me about it, Megan.
I'll tell you something.
But
Jon
Mark,
Stewart did a really good piece on that.
Excuse me, Mark.
Let me just interrupt you because I want to show you, because we're talking about the media. And Mike, you mentioned this ABC report about Arizona, and then there was a contrasting one about the Tea Parties. Let's just show the viewers what you're talking about. Here's the one about Arizona.
Right.
On the streets, there was anger. Riot police were called in to try to control demonstrators protesting outside the Capitol. Most were peaceful. A handful threw bottles at police and were arrested.
I guess ABC is also manipulating its camera. But then the second clip is of ABC talking about the Tea Party protesters.
Outside, protesters against the plan gathered on the streets of the Capitol, where late today we learned words shouted turned very ugly. Reports of racial and homophobic slurs. One protester actually spitting on a congressman.
Mark, that's what we're talking about. One where you say
accurate.
One is very ugly.
What's accurate?
And one is mostly peaceful. Is that a bias?
They were
in
both
reporting?
mostly peaceful. They were both mostly peaceful. Parts
riot
of both
police
turned very ugly. What, the fact that riot police were called out? Like, at the end of the day,
that's kind of significant, Mark.
When Fox has covered immigration protests in the past, I remember one recently on Jon Stewart where he showed them shaking the camera, and then Fox said, they're going to storm the building, going to storm the building. Nobody stormed the building. At the end of the day,
hey, Megan.
all protests should be covered fairly.
Because I actually was on the air when that happened, and I'll tell you what happened there exactly.
Okay.
What happened was the police were on site because they were reportedly fearful that they might storm the building. It wasn't an imaginary thing. The police were there just in case that happened. Now, it didn't happen.
And the police were there at the Tea Party events as well, right?
Go ahead, Mike.
Mark, I know you're paid real well to do a radio show, but here's the deal. You could increase your income. Andrew Breitbart is offering a cash reward if you can prove that the N-word, if you have one shred of evidence that the N-word or anybody was spat upon at any of these Tea Party rallies, I think he's offering like it's like a $100,000 reward.
Here's my shred of evidence. It's very simple. It's very simple.
Yeah.
Civil rights hero John Lewis says it's so. For you to call that man a liar is pretty extreme on your part. And they've caught evidence on tape of Barney Frank being called the F word. It's on tape. Do I get $100,000 now?
It's on tape. Though. Liz, we're off point. I mean, you tell me. In defense of the video, you know, there's video of the Tea Party protesters who are screaming, Mike Gallagher, who are screaming in the face of lawmakers as they walk into the Capitol. And that's where the one claimed that he had been spat upon, and there was a question
including
about
the F word, it's Barney Frank.
And they're much more animated than in that particular video. But does that, I mean, my question to you is, are the media trying to find a narrative here that, you know, in one certain situation versus the other?
There hasn't been a single arrest at a single Tea Party rally. There have never been riot police called in to a Tea Party rally. Mark knows it. You guys Mark, you're playing to a crowd here that wants to demonize the Tea Party bunch and make heroes out of the pro-illegal immigrant criminals. That's what you're up to, and we're not buying it, Mark. The American public ain't buying what you're selling.
Go ahead, Mark.
When Congressman Emanuel Cleaver was called the N-word and spat upon, the police went to him and said, do you want us to arrest this man? And he said, no, I'm just going to let it go. You want proof? Are you accusing the police of being liars as well as John Lewis?
But we're talking,
the police said, we're willing to arrest this guy, and he said, let it go. At the end of the day, I think that all the media, whether Fox or ABC or anybody else, should cover the protests accurately. Say how many people are there, say how many people are committing violence, say how many people are wackos, and do so in the most objective way fashion. Fox practically created the Tea Parties and didn't report on immigration and gay rights rallies that were larger than the Tea Parties.
I think
all the media does it, no one should do it.
Yeah, Megan, I think Mark is right. We got to stop the shaky cameramen. These Fox News cameramen have got to stop shaking their cameras as they're running through a riot. Good point, Mark. You got me.
All of the photographers.
All of them.
Anyway, listen, it was an interesting debate. We appreciate you both coming on and hashing it out for us.
Thanks for having me, Megan.
Well, new development.